I never thought I'd hear my own voice from 80 years ago. But there I was, sitting in my living room in Richmond, Virginia, on a cold Veterans Day morning, listening to a version of myself I'd long forgotten existed. My name is Robert Mitchell, and I'm 98 years old. Most days I move slowly through my small house on Maple Street, the same house my late wife Sarah and I bought in 1952. The neighborhood has changed completely since then, but my house remains the same, filled with memories in every corner. That morning started like any other Veterans Day. I woke up early, made my coffee, and sat by the window watching the red and gold leaves fall from the oak tree in my front yard. November in Virginia brings a particular kind of cold that settles into your bones, especially when you're as old as I am. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw my daughter Jennifer's SUV, and my heart lifted. My 12-year-old grandson, Marcus, burst out of the passenger side, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Grandpa Bob!" Marcus called out as Jennifer opened my front door with her key. The boy rushed in, bringing cold air and excitement with him. His cheeks were red from the cold and his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Easy there, Marcus," Jennifer said, following behind with a warm smile. She kissed my cheek and helped me stand from my chair. "We brought lunch, and Marcus has been dying to show you something." Marcus was already talking a mile a minute about a school project on World War II. His history teacher had assigned the class to interview a veteran or research a family member who served. Of course, Marcus had chosen me. "Mum said you were in the war, Grandpa," Marcus said, pulling out a notebook and a small digital recorder from his backpack. "I want to hear everything. Where did you fight? Did you fly planes? Were you scared?" I chuckled at his enthusiasm. Over the years, I'd told bits and pieces of my service to family members, but I'd never sat down and shared the full story. Some memories were too heavy to carry into casual conversation. "I was in the army, son," I began, settling back into my chair. "Landed in Normandy a few weeks after D-Day. I was just 19 years old, barely older than you are now, thinking I was invincible." Marcus's eyes widened. He hit record on his device and leaned forward, completely absorbed. Jennifer brought us sandwiches from the kitchen, but neither Marcus nor I touched our food. I started talking, and the memories flowed more easily than I expected. I told him about basic training in Georgia, about the cramped ship crossing the Atlantic, about the first time I saw the coast of France. I told him about my buddies, especially Tommy O'Brien from Boston and James Washington from Alabama. After lunch, Marcus asked if I had any photos or souvenirs from the war. I hesitated. There was a box I knew, somewhere in the attic. Sarah had organized all my military papers and medals years ago, but I hadn't looked at them in decades. "There might be some things upstairs," I admitted, "but these old legs don't do ladders anymore." "I'll go." Marcus jumped up immediately. Jennifer tried to slow him down, but the boy was already heading for the hallway where the attic access was located. I directed Marcus to the far corner of the attic, where I remembered Sarah placing a wooden box marked with my name and service number. 20 minutes later, Marcus came down the narrow ladder, his face smudged with dust, carrying a medium-sized wooden box. He placed it carefully on the coffee table in front of me, and I felt my chest tighten. "Can we open it, Grandpa?" Marcus asked, his voice soft now, sensing this was sacred ground. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Jennifer sat beside me, placing her hand on my shoulder. Together we opened the box. Inside were my discharge papers, photographs of young men in uniforms who would stay young forever, medals I'd earned but never displayed, and letters I'd written home to my parents. Beneath everything else was something I'd completely forgotten about, a small reel-to-reel tape, carefully wrapped in brown paper, with a label written in faded ink. "Christmas Message Home, December 1944. Marcus picked it up carefully. "What's this, Grandpa?" I stared at it, my hands beginning to shake slightly. I don't remember this. We recorded messages sometimes to send home to families, but I thought those were all lost." "Do you have a player for it?" Marcus asked, examining the small reel. I shook my head. "Not anymore. Those old machines are probably in museums now." But Marcus was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. "Grandpa, there's a place downtown that converts old tapes to digital. Mr. Henderson in my class took his grandfather's old recordings there. They're open today until 4. Jennifer checked her watch. "We could make it if we leave now." Part of me wanted to say no, to put the tape back in the box and return it to the attic where it had rested peacefully for so many years, but another part of me wanted to know what that young soldier had said all those decades ago. "Let's go," I said, surprising myself. The drive downtown took 30 minutes. The conversion shop was tucked between a bookstore and a Vietnamese restaurant on Broad Street. The owner, a man in his 50s named David, handled the tape with expert care. "This is remarkable," he said, examining it under a magnifying lamp. "December 1944, you said. This is in surprisingly good condition. Give me about an hour and I'll have it digitized for you." We waited in a nearby diner, Marcus asking more questions about the war. When we returned to the shop David had finished, he handed Jennifer a USB drive and offered to play the recording right there. I nodded, suddenly nervous. David pressed play, and after some crackling static, a voice filled the small shop. My voice. Young, uncertain, trying to sound brave. The voice coming through the speakers didn't sound like me at all. It was higher, faster, with a thick accent I'd lost somewhere over the decades, but it was undeniably mine. "Hello, Ma. Hello, Pa. It's Robert, recording this message on December 23rd, 1944. I hope this reaches you before Christmas, though I know that's not likely. I'm somewhere in Belgium, though I can't say exactly where. The censors wouldn't allow it anyway." I felt Jennifer's hand squeeze mine as we listened. Marcus stood completely still, his eyes moving between the speaker and my face, as if trying to reconcile the voice with the old man before him. "It's cold here, colder than any winter back in Richmond. We're dug into positions outside a small town, and the snow just keeps falling. Tommy says it reminds him of Boston, but I think even Boston winters can't compare to this. My feet haven't been dry in 2 weeks." The young version of me paused, and I could hear the crackle of the tape, the distant sound of voices in the background. "I want you to know I'm doing okay. We have warm food most days, and the fellas in my unit are good men. Tommy O'Brien keeps us laughing with his terrible jokes. James Washington shares stories about his family's farm in Alabama. And there's a new guy, Eddie Martinez from Texas, who can cook anything and make it taste like home. We take care of each other." I remembered Eddie now, though I hadn't thought of him in years. He'd been killed 3 weeks after this recording, during the Battle of the Bulge. The memory hit me like a physical blow. "I got the package you sent, Ma. The socks are perfect, and I've already worn them twice. The cookies didn't survive the journey very well, but we ate every crumb anyway. Nothing has tasted that good in months." Young Robert laughed on the tape, a sound so carefree it broke my heart. "Pa, I hope the store is doing well. I know you're working hard to keep things running without me. When I get home, I'll help you rebuild that back storage room we always talked about fixing." There was another pause, longer this time. When the voice resumed, it was quieter, more serious. "The truth is, I'm scared sometimes. Not all the time, but in the quiet moments, when the shelling stops and everything goes still. I think about home. I think about walking down Monument Avenue in the spring, when the trees are blooming. I think about fishing with you, Pa, out at Lake Anna. I think about Ma's pot roast on Sunday afternoons." Marcus had tears in his eyes. Jennifer was crying openly. I felt my own eyes burning. But then I remember why we're here. We're fighting so that families back home can have those Sunday dinners in peace, so that kids can walk to school without fear, so that the world my children and grandchildren grow up in will be better than the one we're living through now. I caught my breath. I'd said, grandchildren. At 19, already thinking about a future that included Marcus, sitting here beside me 80 years later. "I'm going to make it home, Ma and Pa. I promise you that. I'm going to come home, and I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to build a good life, marry a good woman, and raise a family. I'm going to tell my kids and grandkids about these days, about the men I served with, about what we fought for." The young soldier cleared his throat, embarrassed by his own emotion. "Well, they're telling me my time is up. Other fellas need to record their messages too. Merry Christmas, Ma and Pa. I love you both more than I can say. I'll write again soon, and with God's grace, I'll be home before you know it. Your son, Robert." The recording clicked off, leaving only static that David quickly silenced. The shop was completely quiet. Even David had tears in his eyes. I sat there, unable to move, unable to speak. That voice, that boy, that soldier had kept his promise. He'd made it home. He'd married Sarah in 1947. We'd had 3 children, including Jennifer. We'd built a life together, exactly as he'd promised his parents. "Grandpa," Marcus said softly, kneeling in front of me, "you kept your promise. You came home. You had grandchildren. You're here telling me your story." I nodded, finally finding my voice. "I did, didn't I? Though there were times I wasn't sure I would." David made copies of the recording, refusing payment. "Stories like this need to be preserved," he said. "This is living history, sir. Thank you for your service." We drove back to my house in a thoughtful silence, Marcus kept replaying parts of the recording on his phone. Back at my house, we settled in the living room again. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the room. "Grandpa," Marcus said carefully, "in the recording, you said you were scared sometimes. Can you tell me about that? About what happened after you made that recording?" I looked at the box on the coffee table, at the photographs of young men who'd never grown old. I thought about Tommy and Eddie and James. I thought about the cold Belgian winter and the battle that came just days after that Christmas recording. "Yes," I said quietly, "I can tell you about that, but it's not an easy story, Marcus. War never is." Jennifer sat down, understanding that something important was about to happen. Her father, who'd kept so much locked away for so long, was finally ready to open the door to the past. After I made that recording, everything changed. 3 days after Christmas, the Germans launched their last major offensive of the war. We call it the Battle of the Bulge now, but back then we just called it hell. The evening settled around us like a blanket as I continued my story. Jennifer had turned on a lamp, creating a warm circle of light in my living room, but my mind was far from the comfort of that moment. I was back in Belgium, in the freezing forests of the Ardennes. "We were undermanned and undersupplied," I told Marcus. "The Germans had been planning this offensive for weeks, and we walked right into it. Our position was supposed to be a quiet sector, but on December 26th, everything exploded. I could still hear it. The whistling scream of incoming shells, the thunderous explosions, the desperate shouts of officers trying to organize a defense. Tommy O'Brien was the first one to spot them," I continued. "German infantry, hundreds of them, moving through the trees. They were wearing white camouflage, almost invisible against the snow. The fighting lasted for 3 days straight." Marcus looked up from his notebook. "Were you hurt?" "Physically, just minor injuries. Shrapnel cut my shoulder on the second day, but a medic patched me up. The real wounds were different, the kind you can't see." I paused, sipping my tea, gathering courage. "Eddie Martinez died on the first day. We were sharing a foxhole, and a shell landed close enough to throw us both into the air. When I landed, I was stunned but alive. Eddie wasn't as lucky. He was 20 years old." My voice cracked, and Marcus reached out to touch my hand. Such a simple gesture from a child, but it grounded me. "James Washington saved my life on the second night. We were down to about half strength and the Germans kept coming. James and I were holding a section of line with just 4 other guys when a group of German soldiers broke through. I could see it clearly. The confusion of close combat in the dark, the muzzle flashes lighting up the snow, the desperate reality of fighting for your life. A German soldier came at me from the side. I didn't see him until it was almost too late. James tackled him, and they fought in the snow. By the time I got there to help, James had been stabbed. We got the German soldier subdued and called for a medic, but James was bleeding badly." "Did he make it?" Marcus asked softly. "He did, but it took months of recovery. He lost partial use of his right hand, which ended his dream of becoming a surgeon. Last I heard, he was living in Birmingham with his daughter, working as a hospital administrator. We wrote letters for decades. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. "Tommy O'Brien made it through the battle too," I said, a small smile forming. "That crazy Boston kid actually got a medal for valor. After the war, he went home, married his high school sweetheart, and opened a bar in Southie. I visited him once in 1963. Jennifer spoke for the first time in a while. "Why didn't you ever talk about this before, Dad?" I looked at my daughter, seeing so much of Sarah in her face. "Because talking about it makes it real again. For years I wanted to forget, but hearing that recording today, hearing how hopeful that boy was, I realize I owe it to him, to my younger self, to remember, to tell the story." Marcus was still writing. "Grandpa, in the recording, you promised your parents you'd make them proud and build a good life. Did you feel like you kept that promise?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about the years after the war, the nightmares, the difficulty adjusting, the patience Sarah showed as I slowly found my way back. "It took time," I admitted. "I came home in April of 1945, and I thought I'd just pick up where I left off, but I was different. The world was different. I had trouble sleeping, trouble connecting with people who hadn't been through what I'd been through." I shifted in my chair. "But then I met your grandmother. Sarah was a nurse at the Veterans Hospital, where I was getting treatment for my shoulder injury. She'd seen hundreds of returning soldiers, and she had this way of looking past the uniform, past the medals, past the trauma, and seeing the person underneath." Jennifer smiled through her tears. "Mum always said you were the bravest man she knew. Your mother saved me," I said simply. "She gave me a reason to fight through the darkness. We started dating in late 1945, married in 1947, and by 1950 we had your older brother. Life became about the future instead of the past. Marcus looked up. Did the nightmares ever go away? They faded, I said honestly. They never completely disappeared, but they became less frequent. And when they did come, Sarah was there. She'd wake me gently, remind me where I was, hold my hand until my breathing slowed. The room had grown darker. Jennifer turned on another lamp. After the war, I continued, I went back to school on the GI Bill, studied business administration. I worked at an insurance company downtown for 35 years. We bought this house, raised 3 children, took vacations to Virginia Beach every summer. But you never forgot, Marcus said. No, I agreed. You never forget. Especially the men who didn't come home. Eddie Martinez, who wanted to dance at his sister's quinceañera. Private William Chen from San Francisco, who died in my arms. I carry them with me, always. Jennifer took my hand. That's why you visit the War Memorial every Memorial Day. Yes, I said quietly. I go to remember them, to honor them, to make sure someone still says their names out loud. Marcus closed his notebook carefully. Grandpa, can I read my essay to you? I started writing it in my head while you were talking. I'd be honored, I told him. The boy stood up and began to speak from memory. My great-grandfather, Robert Mitchell, is 98 years old. He fought in World War II when he was younger than my parents are now. On Veterans Day, we found a recording he made in 1944, and I heard his voice from 80 years ago, promising his parents he would come home and make them proud. This essay is about how he kept that promise, even though it wasn't easy. As Marcus continued describing the tape, the stories I'd shared, and the lessons he'd learned, I felt something shift inside me. The weight I'd been carrying for 8 decades felt lighter somehow. The next morning I woke to find Marcus already in my kitchen, making scrambled eggs with Jennifer's supervision. The smell of coffee and toast filled the house, reminding me of countless mornings with Sarah. Good morning, Grandpa, Marcus called out cheerfully. We're making you breakfast. I settled into my usual chair at the kitchen table. Jennifer brought me coffee and sat down across from me. Dad, Marcus couldn't stop talking about your stories last night. He's been up since 6 working on his school project. Marcus brought over a plate of eggs and toast, sitting beside me with his tablet. Grandpa, I hope this is okay, but I edited together some of the recording from 1944 with the videos I took of you yesterday. My teacher said it's the most powerful project she's ever seen. She wants to know if you'd come to school and talk to my class. The request surprised me. When? I asked. Next Thursday, if you're feeling up to it. It's just for an hour during history class. Over the next week, Jennifer and Marcus helped me prepare. We went through more of the box, finding photographs I'd forgotten existed. Marcus created a simple presentation with the photos, including the digitized recording from 1944. On Thursday morning, I dressed in my one remaining suit. Jennifer helped me pin my service medals to my jacket, ribbons I hadn't worn in years. Looking in the mirror, I saw an old man, yes, but also caught a glimpse of that 19-year-old soldier. The drive to Marcus's middle school took 20 minutes. Marcus met us at the entrance and led us through hallways decorated with student artwork. His classroom was packed, not just with Marcus's class, but with students from other periods who'd asked to attend. The history teacher, Mrs. Patterson, greeted me warmly. Mr. Mitchell, thank you so much for coming. Marcus's project has inspired all of us. As I sat down and looked at all those young faces, I felt a flutter of nerves. But then I thought about that recording, about the young soldier who'd promised to come home and tell his story. Thank you for having me, I began. My name is Robert Mitchell, and 80 years ago, I was not much older than some of you are now. I was scared, far from home, fighting in a war I didn't fully understand. But I had a duty, and I had brothers in arms, and together, we did what needed to be done. For the next hour, I told them my story. I showed them the photographs, played the recording from 1944, and answered their questions. I talked about the reality of war, not glorifying it, but being honest about the cost of freedom. One girl raised her hand. Mr. Mitchell, do you think what you did mattered? I thought about the world that existed before 1944 and the one that came after. I thought about my children and grandchildren growing up in peace. Yes, I said simply. It mattered. Not because war is good, it's terrible, but because sometimes standing up to evil is necessary. The men I served with, the ones who didn't make it home, they gave their lives so that you could sit in this classroom today, free to learn, free to question, free to become whoever you want to be. The classroom was silent. Then slowly one student started clapping, then another. Soon the entire room was standing, applauding. After the presentation, students lined up to shake my hand, to thank me. Several teachers approached with their own family stories of service. It was overwhelming and humbling. On the drive home, Jennifer was quiet, occasionally wiping her eyes. "Dad," she finally said, "I'm so proud of you. Mom would have been so proud too." Back in my house, exhausted but content, I settled into my chair. Marcus sat on the floor near me. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "I've been thinking. That recording, you said you'd tell your grandchildren about the war. And you did. Today. You kept another promise." The observation struck me deeply. He was right. That young soldier had made a promise not just to come home, but to remember, to tell the story. "You know, Marcus," I said, "I think that recording found us at exactly the right time. You needed to hear it for your project, but I needed to hear it too. I needed to remember that young man who believed in the future." Marcus moved closer, leaning against the arm of my chair. "Will you tell me more stories?" "Yes," I promised. "I'll tell you everything, because that's how we honor the past, by sharing it, by making sure the next generation understands what came before." That evening, as the sun set over Richmond, I thought about the journey from that frozen battlefield in Belgium to this moment of peace. I thought about Sarah and the life we'd built, about my children and grandchildren, about the unbroken chain connecting us all. The recording from 1944 sat on my coffee table, a voice from the past speaking to the future. That young soldier had kept his promise. He'd come home. He'd built a good life. He'd raised a family. And now, finally, he'd told his story. Outside, normal sounds of a normal evening in a peaceful neighborhood filled the air. I picked up the photograph of Tommy O'Brien and me, two kids in uniform, not knowing how much they'd have to endure. "Thank you," I whispered to that photograph, to those memories, to that younger version of myself. "Thank you for bringing me here." Marcus came back from the kitchen, chattering about how his teacher wanted to submit his project to a state history competition. Jennifer smiled from the doorway. This, I realized, was the promise fulfilled. Not just survival, not just coming home, but this moment, surrounded by family, sharing stories, connecting past and future. As night settled over Richmond, I felt a deep peace I hadn't experienced in decades. The voice from 1944 had found its way home, and in doing so, had freed me to finally rest in the knowledge that I'd done what I'd set out to do. I'd kept my promise. I'd made them proud. And that, after everything, was enough.